So Victor Chevalier is a very strong character in Tekken 8. He has very few weaknesses and a ton of strengths. So in this guide, I'm going to show you everything you need to know just to get started with this character. So first and foremost, let's go over his strengths. So his first major strength is that he is a tall character and he's got knives and he's got a sword. So what that means is that he has some of the farthest reaching normals in the game. Some of the hardest to punish normals as well, because a lot of them are safe on block, and he also takes retreating steps on some of them, which opens him up to counter hitting people. And basically, it's just very hard to punish this character. And on top of that, most of his unsafe buttons are not launch punishable. Obviously, your opponent can go into heat, they can punish you with basically at most a 14 frame. He has very few buttons that are actually launch punishable, like his wall rising 1, but otherwise, tons of reach. He can pull out his sword basically instantly and people cannot react to that. And he can just hit somebody over character distance away, and he doesn't even need his sword to do that when he has stuff like his up forward 2 and his back 3. And of course, with that comes very staggerable strings, so you can counter hit people that do try to get in or take their turn. Now onto his next strength, which is his counter hit game. He has a very strong counter hit game. So earlier, like I said, he has very far reaching buttons and a lot of pushback on those buttons. So that opens him up to a ton of counter hit. So his main counter hit is his 1+2. This is the one you use the most. It's a safe 15 frame mid that's only -8 on block, tons of pushback, and pretty good reach on it too, as you can see here. And he also has stuff like his down back 4, an unsafe low that is launch punishable and parryable. However, it has tons of reach and it low profiles, so it goes under highs, and you can counter hit this way and get a ton of damage. And on top of that, he actually has a pretty good throw counter hit in the form of his back 2. So his back 2 on the surface doesn't seem that great. It has very bad range. It's a high so people can duck it, but it is completely safe on block. However, if you're playing against a grappler or just someone who likes to use throws in general a lot, his back 2 is actually pretty good, because to throw somebody, they have to be right up next to you and they have to be standing. His back 2 works pretty well. It guarantees his forward 4-1, which lets him get into heat, and on top of that, it lets him get his down forward 4-2, which lets him get into Lai Stance. Just like that. So it is a little bit tricky on the timing. His next strength is his evasiveness and teleport shenanigans. Victor can basically be at a more favorable distance at any moment with his teleport, which is up, back, back. And it looks just like that, and it's fairly fast. So you can be pressuring someone and then teleport basically instantly. You can do it from crouch as well, and from crouch cancels you can do it. And on top of that, add some of his teleport attacks, like his up 1+2. Up 1+2 can actually go over lows. It can also make mids whiff as well, and he can counter hit with the rest of it. Unsafe on block unless you space it out properly. Then if you do, it's very hard for people to punish you. And he has something like his back 1+4, which is kind of like a backswing, though it is launch punishable on block. And his final strength is his rush down and can opener tools. He has 2 main stances, and in these stances, there's a ton of 50-50. Though most of that 50-50 is very unsafe, but he also has counter hit potential in these stances as well. And really, they're just extremely good knowledge checks. However, they are knowledge checks. So if somebody does understand, how to play against Victor, they'll know not to respect these stances and to hit him out of it basically. Now for his weaknesses, he has 2 main ones. His first one is his stance cancels. His stance cancels on block are awful. On block, he is completely punishable if he cancels into a stance, like this. Victor cannot press anything to prevent getting hit. He can't even go into his low. He will always get hit if he stance cancels on block. And also from his gun. His gun is not good. It's always a high. And though it looks like Victor actually low profiles while in his Lai stance, he doesn't. As you can see there, it's just that I was a bit too far to get hit. And you cannot even armor through anything. You can't power crush people because he is so minus. So people that don't know not to respect the stances, and they don't respect, canceling on block, they can just punish you with a jab or a down forward one, and you'll always get hit by it. So stance canceling, you need to hit confirm into, which kind of puts his rush down, which kind of makes his rush down a little bit weaker. However, if he was able to just cancel into it for free, he would be extremely broken. He'd be way more powerful than he already is. So I think it's a fair trade, though it is something you need to look out for. Do not cancel into his stances on block. You will eat a punish. And on that same note of stance canceling, his gun. So his gun is not great. You can either do it from a string where he'll shoot his opponent, or you could just pull it out with quarter circle forward 2. Now the problem with his gun is that if it whiffs or it's blocked, it always teleports him into Lai Stance, and as I said earlier, on block he is very minus. He cannot defend himself afterwards. Basically, you'll always get punished if you try to do it on block. So getting into Lai Stance from any string that uses his gun is a bad idea. And on top of that, the gun is a high, which means people can duck it, make it whiff, and they can hit you with a launcher, and you cannot do anything about it. And his last main weakness is that his heat is just not that great. Victor burns through heat very fast. As you can see there, just using 2 moves, burnt through all of my heat. Now, the moves that you do get access to from heat are pretty okay. They basically guarantee that Victor gets to go into Lai Stance, and they give him a ton of plus frames, so he can start mixing with his Lai Stance and do a ton of 50-50s. However, like I said, these moves burn through a ton of heat. So you do have that problem of not being able to mix for that long. You really have to use it very, very fast. So those are his strengths and weaknesses, and as you can see, his strengths vastly outweigh his weaknesses. He has extremely good neutral. He's very evasive. He's very hard to punish. He's just all around extremely good at counter hit and really everything. He has a bit of everything and then some, which just makes Victor extremely annoying to play against. And now I want to go over some noteworthy buttons outside of things like his back 3 or his back 1. I want to go over his stuff like down forward 2. His down forward 2 is his main launcher, and it is not even launch punishable by most characters. It's minus 14 on block, obviously, so you're going to get punished afterwards by, at most a 14 frame move, and of course your opponent can go into heat from there. However, most characters cannot punish this with a launcher, and on top of that, it has a ton of range and that forward momentum, so you can whiff punish with it if you don't want to do a counter hit launcher with his 1+2 or down back 4. So his down forward 2 is extremely good. More noteworthy buttons are his down forward 1. It's a 13 frame mid, so it's not the fastest mid, but it does have good enough forward momentum and good enough reach. Not the furthest reaching one in the game, but basically, if you're hitting someone with jab strings, you're just pressuring with jab strings, you can go ahead and throw out his down forward 1 to keep them standing if they try and duck. And it's only -2 on block, so there is no harm in doing it. His next button, or actually his string that I want to talk about, is his jab string, his 1-2-1. So you can pressure with, just jabbing with 1, and then maybe if your opponent starts ducking, you hit him with a down forward 1. But his 1-2-1, you can start pressuring with 1-2, -3 safe on block. However, both hits are high, so people can duck that, and they might try to get a counter hit on you. So you do 1-2-1, and if they try to counter hit, it's a counter hit launcher. The caveat to his 1-2-1 is that if your opponent just holds block, it is -12, so it's a punishable move. It is unsafe, but it is very good. Another thing I want to talk about when it comes to his strings and counter hit, his back 1 is a very good button that I showed earlier, has tons of reach, and it has a follow-up, back 1-2. The second hit is high, but it's completely safe on block. However, because it is a high, people can duck it. But again, if people try to punish his back 1, you can go ahead and do back 1-2 instead and get some nice damage from it. And there's not really a caveat to doing his back 1-2 other than the second hit is high, so if someone calls you out on it, well, you're gonna get whiff punished for doing a high. But otherwise, it's just another guessing game from his back 1 because his back 1 is so good. And obviously, you get tons of space from it, so you could go ahead and whiff punish people if they try to press after you do a back 1. But if you don't want to go for a 1+2 whiff punish or something, you can go ahead and do the second hit, which is completely safe. And for his notable homing moves, his homing buttons are extremely good. So first and foremost, he has his back 4. It's a high, so obviously people can duck it, but it's got good forward momentum, good range, -6 on block, so it's extremely safe, and it basically puts you both back in the neutral. And on top of that, it has counter hit properties. So if you were to counter hit somebody with his back 4, maybe they're trying to sidestep, you can keep them honest with his back 4, and if you counter hit them while they're sidestepping, you get plus 14 frames, which guarantees a down forward 4-2, so you could get into Lai Stance, and a forward 4-1, which lets you get into heat. So back 4 is really good. And his other homing button, which is extremely good, maybe even better than his back 4 in my opinion, though it does not have any counter hit properties, is his up forward 2. His up forward 2 is this, a super far-reaching forward momentum having a mid. It tracks because it's a homing move, so people can't sidestep it. Completely safe on block, by the way. -9, -8 if you space it out a little bit further. And it just has a lot of reach. Very hard to whiff this, but if your opponent is at mid-screen, or you're trying to go in for like a running 2, and you think, okay, maybe they might sidestep or something, you can just throw out his up forward 2. There's no harm in trying. It's -9, so it's definitely not your turn afterwards. However, completely safe to do, and it's just a very good tracking move. And this is what it looks like on hit. There we go. You're +7 afterwards, so you can go ahead and throw out some of his far-reaching buttons, which is very good. So his next button I want to go over is his down 2. His down 2 is a mid heat engager, 18 frames, a lot of forward momentum. He can actually catch people from really far away with it, and it's 0 on block, and it does chip damage. So it's just another very good button of his, probably as good as his other pokes, like his back 1 and his back 3. It's just really good all around. 3, 2, 1, mark. And his last button that I think is very noteworthy is his wall running 2. It looks like that. It can be sidestepped pretty easily. However, it has a ton of range, as you can see right there. It wall breaks as well, and it's a mid, so people can't duck it. And it does a ton of damage just by itself. And on counter hit, it actually is a launcher, so you can get a nice big combo out of it. And finally, it's really good after a heat engager, whether you landed it or not, but mainly if you landed it, because then you get a ton of guaranteed plus frames afterwards, and your opponent cannot really do anything about it, as you can see right there. So it's very good in that regard. So that's going to be it for his noteworthy buttons. So now I want to go over his stances, because Victor has a ton of options from his stances. So first is his main stance, which is Perfumer. It's forward 3, or you can cancel into it from down back 1-1, or his back 1, and some other strings as well, like his 2-1. So his Perfumer stance is his main stance that you'll go into most of the time. This is the ultimate 50-50. His 2-2 is two mids, and he has a 1 that's a low, and he can crouch cancel. So the main mix is either a 2-2, and from 2-2, you can go into Lai Stance, or you could do 2-2, 1+2, which is a bunch of mids that's unsafe on block, so you can get punished, or you could do 2-2-1, which on block is completely safe and basically resets neutral, and it's a counter hit launcher if people try to punish. So for example, if you want to use 2-2 a lot, but your opponent is constantly hitting you out of Lai Stance, you can go ahead and do 2-2-1, get that counter hit launcher, and deal hella damage, which is very good for Victor. And of course, he has his 2-2, 1+2, which is also there to catch people who are going to try and duck the 2-2-1 as that third hit is high. So you got to use those three and mix them up a whole bunch because it's a very strong guessing game that you make your opponent play. And from his Perfumer Stance, he has his 3, which is a Heat Engager, completely safe on block, -8, though it's a little bit slow. It's one of the slower buttons from his Perfumer Stance. But if you're expecting your opponent to like be ducking, or maybe they're just ducking by default, instead of doing a 2-2, you can go ahead and hit them with a 3, and now you'll be in heat and you get to pressure afterwards. And from his Perfumer Stance, he does have one safe option, and it's his 1+2. It's a pretty long mid, 25 to 27 frames. If it hits, it's a wall break if you're doing it in a combo. If it hits just naturally like this, you're +14 afterwards. So you can go ahead right into another Perfumer Stance on wake up and start playing a bit of mix up. And you'll see here that on block, it is plus. It is +4 and does chip damage as well. So that is his only safe option from his Perfumer Stance. If you don't, want to go into his 2-2-1 because your opponent might duck it, if you're afraid of that, you can just go ahead and do 4-3, 1+2. It's a very solid option, though some people can interrupt it if they call it out. Now, on top of that, he can actually crouch cancel his Perfumer Stance. And from here, you get access to obviously crouch buttons, like his down 1+2, which is god awful. Don't use it, it's not that good. And you can do his wall rising buttons, like his wall rising 2, which is very good. Just another one of his counter hit launchers, as you can see right here. So if someone decides to press and they press at the wrong time, you can go ahead and hit them with this wall rising 2 and get a counter hit launch and deal a ton of damage. And his next wall rising button that I also want to talk about is his wall rising 1. It always crumple states on hit, so you don't need to worry about getting a counter hit to use it. It will always naturally crumple state and you get a nice big combo. However, it's one of his other few launch punishable buttons on block. So you can see it's -16, so every character can punish that with a launcher and deal hella damage. And finally, his wall rising 1+2 is completely safe, and it's 2 mids. So if you don't want to go for a counter hit launcher, which is also safe, so I don't see why you wouldn't, you can go for his wall rising 1+2, and that is a completely safe option. And if it does hit, you do get some nice plus frames off it, so you can go ahead and keep pressuring. You're +8 off of that, so you can basically go ahead and do whatever you want afterwards. And to add to the mix of his Perfumer Stance and crouch canceling from Perfumer, he can go ahead and do either instant throws like this, and as I said earlier, he has a very solid throw game by having a 1 break and a 2 break and a 1+2 break. So that way you're forcing your opponent to either commit to a duck, so they'll duck the throw and they'll punish you on that, or you're making them commit to a stand block so they don't get hit by his crumple state wall rising 1. And basically just you just gotta adapt to your opponent. If based on what they do more, it's just another nasty guessing game that they have to play that you force them into. And now to top that all off, you can go ahead and do some nasty teleport stuff. Now obviously his actual normal teleport back is a little bit slow, but you can do it pretty fast. So you can basically pressure, get in, and then kind of fake him out with his teleport, and now you're at a very favorable position for Victor, as he has some very long reaching buttons. So this is very good for you actually. And if your opponent is maybe challenging with a down 1 or a low fast button or a down forward 1, you can go ahead and do an instant up 1+2 and do his teleport mid. Now obviously -20 on block, so you gotta be careful. And I want to talk about his Lai Stance. So his Lai Stance takes a lot of practice, and it's a lot harder to use than his Perfumer Stance, because Perfumer Stance has a ton of options. Lai Stance does not have a lot of safe options. Now he has 3 safe options that he can do. He can either do Lai Stance 1+2, which is that teleport slash. It's +3 on block, however, it's a high, which means if your opponent is able to react to that, they duck it, and then they punish you with a launcher. He has his 2, which is this very far-reaching mid that will also bound your opponent. It's -7 on block. It does chip damage. And as you can see here, basically at this distance, you're neutral. You're just resetting the neutral essentially at this distance. If you're right next to your opponent, again, you are at a decent distance away, but you're -7, so be careful when pressing afterwards. And his last safe button that's really noteworthy is his down 2. Does a pretty good chip damage. It's plus on block, and on hit, it's actually -1, but it does a ton of damage. It can wall splat people, and also it ups his ground game. So if somehow you've ended a combo and you're in Lai Stance and you're by a wall and your opponent does not do any side rolls, like a side ukemi, like what Kazuya does, like what I have him set to do, and they just stay on the ground, down 2 will catch a lot of people and deal hella damage and possibly resplat them. And his final safe string I want to go over is his 4-2, which is a low high. Now the reason why I don't think it's that good is because, one, it comes from a low, and that low that is -13 on block, so it's punishable. And of course, the second hit is a high, so people can catch the low and then they'll just hold down and they'll duck the second hit. And because the first hit is so minus on block, it's very easy to react to the fact that, oh, Victor did not do the second hit, so I'll just punish. And now I want to go over his 50-50. So the main 50-50 is either he'll do 1-1, which is 2 mids, and it wall breaks and it bounds opponents if you do it in a combo. And he also has 1-2-2, which is a 3-hit mid. But the problem with it is that on block, it is completely punishable by a launcher. You can see here, -18. So his 1-1 is a better option because it's -14, which means it's punishable, but at least it's not launch punishable. He has his 3, which is his power crush, so he can armor through moves. However, again, -14 on block. And of course, he has his 4, which is a low. On counter hit, his 4 does pretty good, gets you some really good frames at least. So yeah, you're +8 from his 4 on counter hit. You can continue doing 50-50s, and it also becomes a natural combo with the second hit. So really, that's the extent of the 50-50 from this stance. Obviously, down 1+2 is another thing that exists, but his down 1+2 is a bit too high risk in my opinion, because it's -29 on block, and even after hit, it's -3, and you're reset to a good position for Victor. However, if you want to like pressure afterwards, it's gonna be, you just don't get to pressure afterwards compared to if you land his 4-2. 4-2 is +26, and he teleports right up next to them. And now I actually want to talk about some of his Lai Stance properties just while he's regularly in Lai Stance. So first and foremost, he can parry lows by pressing forward at the same time as a low. You can see there, and he gets a combo. So the combo does pretty good damage. He bounds them instantly from the parry, as you can see there. And the other thing about this stance is that he actually goes under highs by pressing down. So you can see right there, goes right under highs. So if someone whiffs a high, you can punish with a 1-1, or you can punish with a 4-2 probably, as you can see right there, get that counter hit. But yeah, that's the main thing with his Lai Stance. Otherwise, his hitbox is pushed back a bit, so some people will have some trouble actually calculating their distance while you're in the neutral, because he's in this, you know, weird stance. And on top of that, you can cancel Lai Stance and kind of instantly go into a throw. Not as good as canceling the Perfumer into a throw. It's much slower than that. You kind of have to sit through that big animation if you want to actually go and cancel into a throw. So that's going to be it for Victor Chevalier, at least in this guide. I'll probably post more videos of me playing them in ranked and ranking up to, you know, Tekken God, Prime, and whatnot. And probably make more guides about them the more we discover. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to show some combos, and then that'll be it. Hope this guide helped. Really abuse his long range. Really abuse, you know, the fact that he's got a sword and you can just pull it out at any time. Just, you know, he's safe on basically every poke, and he can hit confirm very easily into the follow-ups. However, do be careful of those follow-ups because a lot of them are punishable on block. But yeah, otherwise, he's got great neutral, he's got great rushdown, he can be on top of your opponent at basically any time, and on top of that, he can get away at basically any time. So yeah, Victor is a very strong character. And that's gonna be it. Enjoy the combos. I'll see you in the next video.